Hi everyone, and welcome to youth group. Can you guys believe that Easter is right around the corner? We kicked off youth group this week with an epic egg hunt, and by epic I mean there wasn't enough Easter eggs for everyone, so some of us ended up with no eggs, and those of us that did find eggs opened them up to find that most of them were completely empty. We discussed that if we had known before the egg hunt that there wasn't enough eggs for everybody, or that most of the eggs were empty, we definitely would not have gone on that egg hunt. It just wouldn't have been worth it. We have all had a really difficult year for many reasons. I don't know what kinds of difficulties you've been experiencing this past year. Maybe the most difficult thing that you experienced was a tough soccer practice, or a broken arm, or trying to eat that super extra spicy chicken wing. Or maybe you've been walking through something much more difficult, like rejection, or stress, disappointment, sickness, or the loss of a friend or a loved one. Or maybe the tough things that you're going through are pretty ordinary, but still exhausting, like trying to navigate friend drama, or get your grades up, or learn a new skill. When we're experiencing something difficult, sometimes the thing we need most is comfort from someone who understands what we're going through. When life gets tough, it's really easy to feel alone, like we're the only ones who have ever experienced what we're experiencing, and that no one else could possibly understand. Even though I'm sure you've heard someone tell you before, God is with you, it can still feel like you're going through this life all alone. Maybe when your friend turns their back on you, or maybe when you don't make the team, or pass the test, or get that job, or win that award. Maybe it's when someone says something really hurtful. Or maybe you feel alone when your family is struggling. When life is difficult, we might wonder, why would God let this happen? Should I just give up? Is it all worth it? Now, this may come as a surprise, but even Jesus understands what it's like to ask questions like these. If you've been around the church before, you've probably heard that Jesus died and then rose from the dead a few days later. And you guys, that is what we celebrate every Easter Sunday, and that is what we're celebrating on Easter this year. But before we talk about what happened after Jesus died and his resurrection, let's talk about what happened before, because I think that Jesus has something to show us about suffering. This is Matthew chapter 26. It's a long one, so hang with me. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas, went to the chief priests and asked, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver Jesus over to you?" So they counted to him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him and began to be sorrowful and troubled. And he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little further, he fell to his face on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not my will, but as you will." While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him, a large crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus replied, "Do what you came for, friend." Then the men stepped forward, seized Jesus, and arrested him. In that hour, Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have to come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching, and you didn't arrest me. But this has all taken place that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed at a distance right up to the courtyard. He entered and sat down with the guards to see the outcome. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. But they didn't find anything, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, "This fellow said, 'I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.'" Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." "You have said so," Jesus replied. "But I say to all of you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He's spoken blasphemy. Why do we need any more witnesses? Look now, you have heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" "He is worthy of death," they answered. Then they spit in his face and struck him with their fists. Others slapped him and said, "Prophesy to us, Messiah. Who hit you?" Now Peter was sitting in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You also were with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before all of them. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." He denied it again with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses and swore to them, "I do not know the man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken, "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. In just this one chapter, Jesus experiences more suffering than most of us can even imagine. He said goodbye to his friends. He was plotted against, let down by everyone he loved, arrested, taken to trial, sentenced to death, spit on, beaten, and betrayed by 2 of his closest friends. We might imagine that Jesus walked towards death with complete peace and composure, but the account of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, it tells a very different story. The biblical accounts of this moment say Jesus was overwhelmed and in anguish and exhausted because he knew what was going to happen. They even tell us that Jesus' sweat, it turned into blood. That's a condition that can happen under extreme stress. In the final hours before Jesus' death, we see him asking, "God, is there any other way?" Good Friday is coming up this week, and it's the day that we remember the suffering Jesus endured on our behalf. It's a day of grief, but it can also be a day of comfort. If we remember that we are loved by a God who doesn't just understand our pain in theory, but in experience. It doesn't matter how extreme your suffering is or isn't. Jesus understands. Whether it's a tough class, a difficult relationship, or something much, much more painful, Jesus understands. when life gets hard, there are two ways we can be reminded that Jesus understands us. Jesus' suffering reminds us that we are not alone. Because Jesus suffered so deeply, there's no suffering that we can face that Jesus doesn't understand. Jesus' suffering reminds us that we can go to God with our own suffering. No matter how big or small your suffering is, we can go to God with boldness. We can tell God what happened, how we feel, and what questions we have. Sometimes experiencing pain and suffering can make us feel far from God. But what if we decide to see pain and suffering as a way to get closer to God? What if everything hard that we ever faced is an opportunity to know Jesus better? Are you disappointed, stressed out, lonely, afraid? Jesus understands, and he knows what that is like. What if instead of asking God, why did you let this happen to me, you asked Jesus, when did you feel this way? This Good Friday, I hope that you remember that we can't always avoid pain, but there is a real person who understands. Jesus knows how you feel, and his heart breaks when yours is breaking. Sometimes there is no greater comfort in the midst of pain than to know that somebody else gets it. So isn't it incredible to know that the Jesus who suffered, he suffers with you? On Good Friday, that is truly good news.